Hello, I'm Kristen and this is Kristen Craze Books. So I'm back again with another monthly most anticipated releases video, and I cannot believe I'm already doing my April one since I think my first one was February, so my time on BookTube is going by so quickly. I'm just having so much fun with this. And if you don't know, I have a Goodreads shelf where I list all of my most anticipated books of the year, so I'll link that down below. But as of filming, it's up to 231 books, which obviously I won't get to, but I feel like I'm adding books on there every day just because even if I don't read them, they sound interesting and I want to bring them to your attention and to my readers' attention on my blog. So I'm always adding books on there and looking for what's coming out next. So April has quite a few, so let's just get into this because I don't want this video to be too long. So I'm going to do this all by date. So we're starting with all the books that come out on April 6th. And actually I've already read 3 of these. I had 2 e-arcs and 1 ALC from Libro FM, so I'll start there. So the book that I listened to is Broken by Jenny Lawson. You might know Jenny Lawson. She was a very popular blogger. I'm not sure if she still has her blog, but I remember when she did and then when it was really popular. And she also has put out a few other memoirs. I have Fiercely Happy. I think it's on my favorites shelf somewhere. And it's got the raccoon on the cover. It was definitely a cover buy for me, but I instantly fell in love with her and her writing. Jenny Lawson has a lot of autoimmune disorders, and I know she has rheumatoid arthritis and some mental health, and she's very honest about her experiences, but she talks about them in a way that's funny. She has such a great sense of humor, and I think a lot of people will read her story and relate to her. And so Broken might be my favorite of her so far, and I highly recommend listening to it on audiobook because she narrates it. She's hysterical. And it's like you're listening to a friend or even your inner self talk to you. There's so much in here that I think people will relate to and take a lot away from. And she does it with the humor. So while she's talking about heavy subjects, it does have a lighthearted feel. So that's comes out April 6th. I think a lot of people are going to love that. Highly recommend the audiobook if you're into audiobooks. And then one of the e-arcs that I read was The Infinity Course by Kimi Don Bowman. And I actually have a reading vlog where I'm reading that book and falling in love with it, so I will link that below and put in the cards as well. And Kimi Don Bowman is an author that I already love. Starfish is one of my favorite books ever, but this book, she kind of delves into sci-fi, and she does an incredible job with it. It is such an interesting concept in this book. We're following a main character who, this is not a spoiler, happens in the first chapter. She dies on her way to a party. She's murdered. And she ends up in an afterlife that is being taken over by Ophelia, who is an artificial intelligence, much like Siri or Alexa. And Ophelia is not happy with how she's treated in the human world. She's taken over the afterlife and treating humans the way that AI have been treated. And there's a lot of great ethical and moral questions in here. You understand Ophelia's motives so deeply. I love a villain where you just get them. And our main character, she gets her as well. So she feels a connection to Ophelia. She treated Ophelia kindly in her life. So I think they have a connection there. She actually kind of misses her. It's a watch that she'd wear. And this story goes in places I did not see coming. Sometimes I felt the messaging was a little heavy-handed, but it's so well done. I think that this is a great start to a series, and I'm so excited that that's almost out and I can talk about it with other readers. And then the last one that comes out April 6th that I've already read and fell in love with. And actually, I think I said I had an e-arc. It was an ALC from Libro FM that I listened to this on audiobook. And that is Somewhere Between Bitter and Sweet by Lake and Kemp. And this is pitched as a romance, but it's really a coming of age story, and you get the perspective of both of our main characters as they're coming of age, as they're discovering what makes them happy, as they're finding a place to call home. And what I really liked about this is that their relationship is what's easy for them. We see them fall in love, we see them get together, and it's outside forces where the conflict happens, where they're dealing with some issues and where they're struggling, but their relationship together is strong, is steady. There's not the miscommunication tropes in here. It's really the outside pushing against them. So one character is wanting to work in her family's restaurant, but her father wants her to go to college. And she moves out and she really just wants to be a chef and doesn't understand why her father doesn't want that for her. And you slowly discover why as the story goes on. And then her love interest is somebody who works for her father, and he's an undocumented immigrant, and so he's trying to find a place to call home, and you really learn more of his backstory. So it's just a beautiful book. I could go on and on about it, but it's great on audio as well. So that's somewhere between bitter and sweet. Highly recommend it. So I think that's all I've read that comes out in April. So let's get to the rest. I think there's 3 or 4 more for April 6th, so we'll get to those right now. The first one I have here is actually a YA horror novel, which I don't read very often, but am being drawn to more and more, and that is House of Hollows by Crystal Sutherland. And this one follows sisters who are kidnapped when they were younger, and then I think months later they are found and they're returned home, but their hair color starts to change. I think their eyes go from blue to black, and weird things are happening. And one of the sisters wants to have a normal life, but then the other sister goes missing. So they work together. The 2 remaining sisters come together, and kind of there's clues left behind to try to figure out what happened to their other sister. So I love any book about sisterhood. I'm really getting into horror, and this has a stunning cover, so I think this has a lot of potential. I've already seen some people reading this and loving it. And then we have The Cost of Knowing by Bethany Morris, and I actually have the e-arc of this, so I'm hoping to get to it between now and April 6th. And I've talked about it a few times, but it just sounds like it's going to be heartbreaking, but an intriguing premise, and it's got a little bit of magical realism. So our main character can touch somebody and know how they're going to die, and I think he touches his brother, and he sees his brother's imminent death, and now he's trying to stop fate from happening. So I think I'm going to have tissues for that one. And I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it, but I'm excited for it to be out in the world and for people to read it, because I think it's going to be an important book. Then the next one just sounds so much fun. It's Pride and Premeditation by Terza Price. And I haven't read a lot of Pride and Prejudice retellings, but I want to. I know Pride by Ibiza Boyd is one on my list, but this one is Pride and Prejudice, but making a murder mystery. Elizabeth Bennet is 17 years old, and she wants to get into law. She wants to be a detective, and I believe Mr. Bingley is accused of a murder in this book, and Darcy is his lawyer. So Elizabeth and Darcy meet, and I think there's a hate to lovers kind of thing in here. I'm concerned she's 17, so I don't know how old Darcy is. We'll see how that all plays out. But I love the cover and I love the premise, so I have high hopes for this one. Next one is actually the 3rd book in a romance series. I haven't read the 1st book, but I love the 2nd book. And so the 3rd book is coming out in April, and it's called Life's Too Short by Abby Jimenez. And the 2nd book was the Happy Ever After playlist, or the Happily Ever After playlist. And I just thought that book was beautiful. It really took me by surprise, dealt a lot with grief. And I think we're going to get similar themes in Life's Too Short. And this book follows Vanessa, who is not sure if she has the same fatal genetic condition that her mother has. So I think she kind of avoids this. It's not something she wants to know. And she travels. She's a travel influencer. She's on YouTube. Then something happens and she is left custody of her half-sister's daughter. So now she's grounded. Her life is completely turned upside down. She can no longer travel because she's raising a child. And then something happens. She falls in love with a neighbor. And I'm not sure how the romance plays out, but something that I appreciate about this series is that it tackles heavier themes, which definitely seems to be the case in Life's Too Short, so I can't wait for that. It's one of my most anticipated romances of the year, and I can't believe it's almost out here. Okay, so that's it for April 6th. We'll move on to April 13th, and the first one is actually the Mary Shelley Book Club, and that is by Goldie Moldavsky. And it's interesting because Frankenstein was not my favorite book, but I read it in high school. And you know how required reading is. I might like it more now if I read it on my own and not having to analyze it to death. But I love these ideas of books about book clubs who read a certain author, like the Jane Austen Society. There's the Jane Austen Book Club. I just think that's kind of a fun idea. And this one's actually a thriller. And it says here that new girl Rachel Chavez is eager to make a fresh start at Manchester Prep. But as one of the few scholarship kids, Rachel struggles to fit in, and when she gets caught up in a prank gone awry, she ends up with more enemies than friends. So it's obviously YA, about fitting in, and then there's pranks involved, and these pranks go wrong, and I think the story gets really, really dark. So I'm intrigued by that one for sure. And then we have When the Stars Go Dark by Paula McLean. This is actually the author of The Paris Wife, which I found in a free little library last summer but haven't read yet, but this seems to be a completely 180 from what she normally writes. And this is actually a murder mystery, and our main character moves home and she's a detective. And what happens is there's a murder of a young girl in the present day that really reflects something that happened to our main character in her childhood, and I'm wondering if it goes 2 timelines. I'm not sure, but I love books that do that. So I think it's her trying to connect the 2 murders and figure out what's happening here. And it's been getting a lot of good buzz. So the premise doesn't seem like anything too new, but I've heard great things about her writing, and I do have high hopes for this one. And then we have another romance, and it's Second First Impressions by Sally Thorne, and I'm cautiously optimistic about this one because while I enjoyed the hating game, having time away from it, I see some of its problems with it. And I never read 99% Mine because I heard such mixed things, but I've been hearing some good things about this one. I know that it follows our main character who works in a retirement community, and the boss's son begins to work there, and they have a friends to lovers kind of romance. And I've heard the banter is great in here. There's some good conflict, some good side characters. So I'm just ready for like a sweet romance. I don't read as many friends to lovers romances as I should. Next up is Open Waters by Caleb Azuma Nelson. This is said to be a love story between 2 artists who continue to fall in and out of love throughout their lifetime. And I have found that I really enjoy books that take place over a number of years and we see the complications of relationships. It kind of reminds me of the premise of Normal People, but I love books about artists. You'll see that I read a lot of books where art's involved. There's something about that I just think is really intriguing. I love reading about characters with have a passion for something creative like that. And it just sounds like it's going to be a really beautiful book. Now we're on to April 20th, and the first one I have here is The Forest of Stolen Girls by June Her. And the premise of this one sounds really similar to When the Stars Go Dark, as we're following a story where a main character moves away from home, and then when she comes back to her hometown, there's mysteries happening, murders are happening. So in this one, our main character and her sister are kidnapped when they were children, and they were found unconscious in a forest, and her family moves away to run away from this tragedy to escape the memories. And then I think 13 more girls are being kidnapped in the same way that she was when she was a child. So her father goes back to try and see what's happening, and then he disappears as well. So our main character goes back to her hometown trying to find her father and see what's happening here. And I think she reconnects with her sister. So once again, I love stories about sisterhood. I really like mysteries. So I'm really, really intrigued by this one. Then we have a YA romance, and it's called She Drives Me Crazy by Kelly Quidlin. And as you can see by the cover, this is a sapphic romance between a basketball player and a cheerleader. And I think it's hate to love. There's some fake dating. I'm sold on it. Sounds adorable. Then we have one of my most anticipated romances of the year. I'm realizing how many romances are coming out in April, which is exciting and makes sense because it's on the brink of summer, and that's when people start to read more and more romances. But this one is In the Deeper Waters by F.T. Lucan. It follows Prince Tal, who's on his grand tour, and along the journey, his crew captures a prisoner, and Tal is in charge of looking after this prisoner, and the prisoner escapes, and they later reconnect, and a love brews between them. Sounds really sweet. I like books set on ships. Very intrigued by this one. One of the best covers of the year, in my opinion. Next is one that I've seen so many people have advanced copies of, and I've been so envious, and that is Witches Steeped in Gold by Sienna Smart. And really, I don't know much about it for as anticipated as it is for me. If a story is about witches, I want to read it. I've been really getting into YA fantasy lately. I'm just going to read you the tagline here, and it says, "Divided by their order, united by their vengeance." So it's an enemies story where we're following 2 witches who hate each other, but they have a common enemy who they work together to fight against. And I'm sure there's some great banter in here, some great friendship involves. Really, really excited to experience this witchy story. The last book that I have on this list that comes out on the 20th is the one that I just added to my list. Something about it really intrigued me, but I don't know much about it. And this one's called These Feathered Flames by Alexandra Overy. And it says that it's a queer retelling of The Firebird, which is a Russian folktale that I don't know anything about. But the cover is intriguing. I've been getting into these retellings. I really want to find ones that I love. So I really like the tagline for this one. It says, "Magic demands payment." And I know it follows 2 princesses whose mother has died. So a new queen has to be crowned. And the princesses find out who killed their mother, who they can trust. And I believe it's the start of a series. So something about it is just telling me that I'm going to love it. Now we're on April 27th, and the first one I'm so excited about, but I need to catch up with the series, and that is Fugitive Telemetry by Martha Wells. I have read the first 4 books in the Murderbot series. I still haven't read the 5th. It's the full-length novel, and then this one's the 6th. So I don't want to tell you too much about what the 6th book is about, but the series overall is following an AI named Murderbot, and they are more sentient than people around them believe. And all they want to do is sit around and watch TV, but their role is to be a murder bot, to murder people for humans. They're hired to kill people. And they always say that they hate emotions, they hate humans, but you slowly see that that's maybe not the case. And it's just hilarious. Highly recommend. Need to read the 5th book so I can read the 6th one. And that is it. That's all the ones I could find that I'm interested in for April. So if I missed any that should be on my radar, please let me know in the comments. Let's talk about these books because I am excited about every single one of them. I've got a lot of reading ahead. I always want to read backlist books, but with so many good books coming out, it's easy to get distracted, and I think that's fine. So I got a lot of romance reading ahead of me in April. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm always so grateful for your time, so I'll talk to you again soon. Bye for now.